nice hot summer day. Get ready for 10 more degrees of heat tomorrow. It'll be in the 90s. Um, Remember the methodology for Zoom. You're all on mute. Um, and those who are going to be speaking, don't forget when you are, you've got to unmute yourself. Um, on the upper right-hand corner of your screen is something that says speaker view. And if you just want to see the person speaking with without all the other squares, then press that speaker view. If you press it again, you get back to the squares. Also at the bottom, there's a little window that says chat. And if you have a question or comment, you can click on that and you can direct your chat to or question to a person on our list or just to general to everyone. I'm also going to ask you that if you, I need to know if we should continue this through the summer on Wednesday evenings. So if you can, at some course of the next hour, either, press on that chat and say continue or take a break. And if anybody has particular topic of interest or someone you want, to introduce to us, please let me know that. I want to welcome Isabel Cage, who's joining us, Father Aidan McAleenan, and I thought Father Jan Olowin was going to be on as well, but I don't see him yet. He might be struggling with Zoom. When I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, many years ago, my hero was my Uncle Don. He was a police sergeant in the Toledo Police Force. When he was on coffee break, he would drive over to the house in his police car, which was like one of the most exciting things because all the kids in the neighborhood would run, and want him to turn the lights on or, put the flashers on, his siren. He was a hero. That was 60 years ago, 50 and 60 years ago. The times have changed an awful lot between then and now. We were always taught to love and respect all people. That was our religious and family upbringing. But at the same time, our neighborhood was not integrated. It was Polish and Catholic for miles and miles around. And as other ethnic groups started moving in and Afro-American communities started moving in, I don't ever remember being instructed or taught that we can all get along together. We could even live in the same neighborhoods together because there was a mass migration out of the neighborhood as people got better jobs and moved to the suburbs as another ethnic group or African Americans moved in. And what was the missing component is the desire to be able to share life with one another. So tonight, I've asked a few people to join us so that we can hear firsthand about their experience and how we can learn that living together in the best ways possible. And I wanted to begin asking Mary Olowin to set a kind of context for us. Mary, most of you know Mary. Her work has been in adult and child psychiatry and in urology. Her first job was directing an inpatient adolescent unit at a children's hospital in Oklahoma. And her last job was chief of mental health at Kaiser Walnut Creek in Martinez. And I asked her to help us understand what are some of the dynamics inside our heads and our minds that allow us to create divisions among people and with the other. So Mary, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the idea of kinship. Kinship means being one with the other. Greg Boyle, the Jesuit founder of Homeboy Industries in Los Angeles, says that with kinship as the goal, other essential things fall into place. And without kinship, we have no justice, no peace. He reminds us that Mother Teresa diagnosed the world's ills in this way. She said, "We've just forgotten that we belong to each other. We are interdependent. When we don't forget that we belong to each other, that's kinship. Tonight we're talking about race. Race is a social construct. This means that it's an idea we made up. It does not have a basis in science. If you look at my DNA and the DNA of a person from Asia and the DNA of a person from Africa, you would not be able to tell the difference. There's no evidence that the groups we commonly call races have distinct unifying genetic identities. The origin of the phrase white people can be traced to the colony of Virginia in the late 1600s. It was used to give certain rights to one group of people and to deny them to another. We have many ways of distinguishing kinship groups: the aristocracy and the peasants, the professionals and the working class, the native born and the immigrant, or, as in West Side Story, the Jets and the Sharks. Within our Catholic faith, we've created kinship groups with some very finely nuanced distinctions. As Father John has told us in the past, growing up in Toledo, in his community, if a Polish Catholic married an Irish Catholic, that would be a mixed marriage. A second cousin of mine who lived in New York City said she'd date an Italian, but she would only marry a man of Polish origin. Sometimes the other is a person with different religious beliefs. Sometimes it's a person with the same beliefs, but a different skin color. Sometimes the same skin color, but different political ideas. Regional differences are yet another way to create the other, the person or group who are not us. Why do we create kinship with these smaller groups, including so-called racial groups, rather than perceiving ourselves as kin with the entire human race? Well, there are many reasons. We might do it to reinforce our own group's sense of itself, to increase our group's power and self-esteem, or we may do it out of self-interest and greed. We may do it for self-protection, or to feel proud and part of something special. Having a group that is identified as other makes our group more cohesive. We pull together in a way we might not without perceiving someone or some group as other. But we have to work at identifying that other. There's a song about racism in the musical South Pacific titled, "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught." You've got to be taught to hate and fear, say the lyrics. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8. The Nazis had a huge propaganda initiative to teach people to hate and fear Jews, even though there was a bedrock of anti-Semitism already in existence. We may not appreciate that we've been taught to fear and hate, but bias and prejudice and fear of the other are ubiquitous in our culture. We have grown up learning it and absorbing it. If we've been taught to fear the other, how do we unlearn what we've been taught? Thankfully, we have a tool. Each one of us has a brain. We all have a prefrontal cortex that allows us to think, study, learn, contemplate, reflect, decide, plan, and then act to recognize that our kinship is with every person on this planet. We can enhance our emotional intelligence and develop empathy for the experiences of others. Jesus expressed outrageous compassion and inclusivity. He empowered marginalized people. Why would God want any of his people to be marginalized? As I listen to tonight's speakers, I will keep in mind that my attitude and my opinion sometimes seem like reality. To counter this, My task is to be open-minded, to pay attention, and to humbly listen. Being one with the other, experiencing kinship, requires the openness and generosity of deep and heartfelt listening.
Thanks so much, Mary. That gives us a good basis to proceed. I wanted to start after Mary's introduction with something on one level it's entertaining, on another it's deadly serious. I don't know if you watch the Late Night Show with Seth Meyers. He has a screenwriter whose name is Amber Ruffin. And for 4 nights in a row, he had Amber, an African-American young woman, talk about experiences that she had in terms of, well, you'll see as she talks about it. You know, it's through stories and people's stories that we come to a deeper understanding. So take a listen to Amber's personal story and her interaction with police, that she, one of many.
Last night, I told you a story about an encounter I had with police. Now let me tell you another story. One time, a few years ago, I was living in Amsterdam, and I flew to Chicago for the weekend to visit some friends who live there. When I got there, my friend Jeff and I hopped in his car and headed out to pick up our friend Krasny, who just so happened to live next to the alley behind the police station. So Jeff parks his car at the gas station at the end of the alley so that I can run out, go pick up Krasny, and take her back to the car. I'm friggin' thrilled. I hadn't seen her in years. So we were all going to go have dinner and catch up. Now, I get out of the car and go down the alley, and because Jeff is watching me, I skip down the alley to her house to make him laugh, you know. But little did I know, skipping down a police station alley is a big no-no, because I end up skipping towards a cop car that's driving at me down the alley. The sirens go off. A cop gets out and his gun is drawn and he goes, "Put your hands on the hood of the car! Put your hands on the hood!" This man is furious. I comply, and his partner pats me down. Now, this man is livid. It makes no sense. His anger level towards me is insane. I'm a young, adorable delight, literally skipping down the street, and I've infuriated him. So this man asked me, "Where are you coming from?" And I go, "Amsterdam." Now, this answer enrages him. And he goes, "No, where are you coming from right now? Where are you coming from?" And I go, "From the airport, from a flight, from Amsterdam." And he goes, "Why in the world are you running down this alley?" I go, "I'm not running, I'm skipping. I'm happy to be back in town. I'm going to pick up my friend Krasny and take her back to Jeff's car, and we're all going to go catch up over dinner." And I remember, oh, thank God, Jeff is here. I gesture back to Jeff. Jeff is standing outside of his car, just watching all of this. And he goes, so the cop and I see Jeff, and thank God Jeff didn't come running up to us because he could have gotten us both shot. But the cop sees that Jeff, a white man, has seen all of this, and he changes his attitude with the quickness. He's suddenly professional instead of antagonistic. And he tells me that I was wrong for running. And it takes everything in me not to tell him that if I wanted to run down the alley, that would be perfectly legal. So instead, I also gently remind him that I was not running, I was skipping. So the cop gets in his car and he leaves. And I walk to Krasny's house. I get her. We take her back to the car. Jeff is really bothered by what happens, but I'm not. That man could have shot me in a second. People who know me would be running around talking about attacking an officer. Doesn't seem like something Amber would do, but the officer said she did. So that has to be what happened. So the second I see Krasny, I feel a lot better. And We go and we have a lot of fun that night. And if you think about it, it's kind of my duty to have fun because at any time I could get murdered by the police. Now, every Black person I know has stories like that. It's crazy that people don't run around telling everyone these stories all the time, but there's this unspoken rule that Black people are supposed to take it in stride. Can you imagine having someone pull a gun on you and being expected to take it in stride? Now imagine a bunch of incidents like that over one lifetime. Multiply that by 43 million African Americans. And that is why things are like this right now. That is why people are angry. And if you're not angry, why not?
It's not going very well.
The last 2 days, I've told stories about my run-ins with...
She's got 3 stories, each one more wonderful and frightening than the last. So you can watch that yourself on YouTube and catch the other stories. So as I say, I think it's through stories that we understand better rather than principles or theories and so on. It's the human life stories that show us what's going on and what shouldn't be going on. So I want to welcome Isabel Cage. Rita Mitchell introduced me to Isabel, who is Indonesian, but living in the United States for 20 years, Catholic from birth, or as she says, Catholic since my mother's womb, just to emphasize how devoted her mother was as a Catholic. Lives in Antioch with her husband and 3 young adult children, is an early childhood professional in her career, working for Head Start program. So Isabel, tell us a little bit about your story.
Thank you, Father John. Thank you, Rita, again for inviting me. You know what interesting about this, when Rita invited me, I said yes right away without checking with my husband. Just, after I said yes, and then I checked with him, I thought at least out of respect, because my story is his story too. His initial response said, oh, sure, why not? But then, he said, I really don't know what you're trying to do with that. What impact would it done? I said, honey, at least, these are a group of people who open to dialogue and want to hear our story. If anything, at least I would share some of our life story, the real thing. So then he said, okay, sure, why not? Like Father John said, I'm Indonesian, but I don't look Indonesian because I'm Indian by blood. I was born and raised in Indonesia. I'm a 3rd generation Tamil. Unfortunately, because throughout my life, my parents never kind of forced me to speak Tamil. So Bahasa Indonesia is my first language. Now, in Indonesia, we are minority because we are Tamil and dark skin and also Catholic. If any of you know, Indonesia is majority Muslim. So like double minority for us. But, we live together with our neighbor, whatever their religion, and we're like in a good community. Anyway, and then, of course, just like what we heard throughout my life also, the expectation for me one day to be married to an Indian and Catholic. Until I came to the United States, and I was a single when I came here. I wasn't planning to live here this far. When I came here, I came as a teacher with a working visa with, of course, limited stay. I didn't plan to fall in love, and nonetheless, with a Black man and not a Catholic. So when I informed my parents that, I dated this Black man, they're very furious. They were very upset, and, because unfortunately, the Black people of American Black people portrayed really bad in Indonesia, just through the media. All they know, if you're Black, they must be drug dealer, criminal, anything you can name them. And it doesn't matter how much I try to educate my parents, they will not have it. And to make it worse, a year after that, I told them I got married to this man. And that just even make it just the worst of the worst. My parents disowned me for a couple of years. They did not want to talk to me. None of my siblings. I'm the oldest in the family, so it was really hard because we were really close, and that was really hard. It was the darkest part of my life. And anytime like and not what I forgot to mention, my husband is also a divorce with 2 young kids at the time. So my parents feel like, am I that desperate? I have to marry a black man, raising 2 young kids, and not Catholic. So that's just like the bottom of the bottom. So, and then with lots of prayer, perseverance, finally just God really touched my parents' heart and my family. Slowly, they accepted that this is the life I have. And even before, so both my parents already passed away. My mom passed away 2018 and my dad passed away last year. So, but they, every time we video call, they would talk. And every time I went home for a holiday or vacation, they would just buy so many gifts for my husband and for my kids. So, those 2 kids, I never give birth to them, but I've been raising them in the past 16, 17 years. I totally forgot I never give birth to them. So, and they call me mom. And we are very close, and I am very blessed for that, because I know a lot of blended family have a lot of challenges, but we are good. And my husband did not oppose me. The kids asked to be baptized Catholic. So, they learned and they got baptized, they got confirmed. I did in the initial, tried hard to kind of like convert my husband. So I was hoping he become a Catholic, my parents would love him even more. Of course, with life experience, I just know Catholicism is not for everybody. My husband is good enough for me without being a Catholic. And I let go of that, because if I will not even convert to whatever he believes in, who am I to expect him to convert to what I believe in? So anyway, and he is still sometimes go to church with me, just, and I join the choir, who will come. And so we do that. Some story that we heard earlier, Father John played for us, that reminded me of our family experience. When we just moved here to the Bay Area about 13 years ago, my husband made a wrong U-turn. I don't know if any of you are familiar with San Francisco State University area. So there's a part there you cannot make a U-turn, and we are new. So my husband make a U-turn. The cop follow us and stop us, but waited for another backup. Imagine this: you just make a wrong U-turn, but my husband drove a Lexus, a black man. This cop drawn his gun, pointed, just like, and my husband just said, I'm not doing anything, I'm gonna pull my wallet. But I was just like, so that's just a real experience we had. And not to mention, there's so many, something similar to that, to the point that just, I don't know if you've ever known a lot of African-American family, what they teach their children at such a young age, how to behave when the cops stop them. You do not resist arrest, just comply, so that has been drilled down to my kids. Now, a lot of time that the one that most hurtful for me, the experience I feel, even initial, before I got married to my husband, some of my friends from my country just said, wow, why don't you marry a white man? That will be helpful for your skin to make it, fair. So this is another thing that you got to learn. I don't want to say all Asian country, but in Indonesia, they praise white skin. Believe it or not, a lot of cosmetics, all lotion, they have those in Indonesia, they all have whitening substance in it. It's just the reality. And I told them, you know what? I love my husband. I love my black husband. And I think my black skin is beautiful. So, and they couldn't stand it. But you know what? I believe in what believe. You can believe what you believe. So when we just moved to South San Francisco, we visited this one church, a Catholic church. It's really convenient because it's 5 minutes walking from our house. As soon as we entered, the usher talked to this lady who is sitting at the back pew, not in English. I will not mention what language that is, but without understanding what they're saying, you can only see the gesture. Like this guy telling the person who's sitting in a way that saying like, you gotta move. And then this person like grabbed the bag with a look of horror towards us. And my husband just said, what, do you think we're gonna steal that purse? And then the usher said, no, I was just telling her to move because it's occupying so much space. You know what? He might be telling the truth, but it's just the gesture and everything. It's hard really to see it as that way. My husband was really upset, First of all, he's not Catholic, and here I am trying to bring him to a Catholic church who is so unwelcoming. So he decided to leave. He did not stay. A couple of weeks after that, I said, come on, let's just try. Let's try again. We went. We are the only Black person in that congregation, maybe one or two white. Everybody stared at us. They stared. There's a different stare, like, wow, welcoming stare. There's stare just like looking at you like dead stare. My kids were so bothered, even though I told them, just ignore them, we are here to pray. But they said, Mom, I can't. This is just make me angry. So they finally stopped to go to church. It took us a while to find a Catholic church that is welcoming. And what makes it really hard for me, I'm trying to bring my husband to a community that we're welcoming. I mean, this is the impression he got. They're like, you want me to be Catholic and this is how you treat me? I mean, but we are just lucky enough that, we found another home parish when we still live in Peninsula. And then now we live here in Antioch, and I find a parish that's really welcoming. And me, especially being a Catholic throughout my life, a struggling Catholic, finding a parish that is welcoming is very important for me. And being the only practicing Catholic now in my house, I feel like this is the community gonna help me to be better. So then, that's pretty much a little bit about me and my story, Father John and everybody.
Thanks, Isabel.
Yes.
If you came to St. Perpetua's, we would welcome you and your husband and your children. I would certainly hope so. Thanks for being with us. As I said, it's finding out the real life stories of people. And it might seem like a simple, insignificant thing, but as the gal in the video, Amber, said, when that happens over and over and over again, it builds up an attitude and a fear within people. And as she said, multiply that by 43 million Blacks in our country, and you'd be upset too. I wanted to welcome Father Aidan McAleenan joining us. Those of you who know Aidan, he's pastor of St. Columba Church on San Pablo Avenue, kind of on the border of Oakland and Berkeley. And he's been pastor there for 11 years. He's also worked at other places, St. Bonaventure's and Christ the King. Aidan was born in Ireland, and on June 3rd, it was his 15-year anniversary. So Aidan, we see, where are you there?
Right beside you, John.
There you are. Aidan, when your 15th anniversary was just a little while ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had read what you wrote with some pictures of your ordination and so on. You looked much younger then.
Thank you, John. I had gray hair, or no gray hair then.
No gray hair like me, no gray hair. Anyway, one thing you wrote, you said, I love all whom I have served. You were thanking your family and Bishop Cummins and the people who flew to Ireland to be at your ordination in your home church where you were baptized, made your first communion, confirmation, buried your parents and your brother from the same church. That's an amazing heritage. But you wrote, I love all whom I have served, but I love my parish family at St. Columba's. I've learned way more at Columba than any seminary could have taught me. I am a better priest for their patience with me over these last 11 years and the joy that we celebrate together in Christ. So tell us, the things that you've learned as being that white pastor in an African-American parish.
Well, I don't see myself as a white pastor. I just see myself as Aidan, pastoring at St. Columba. There's a concept that I've learned through Oakland Community Organization, which the Jesuits started in Oakland. It's now called Faith in Action, and it's Ubuntu. And it's the concept of I am because we are. And I love that understanding of being a product of the realities that you find yourself and of the people you meet along the way. I was born in 1962. My mother was a 21-year-old. My father was 28. It was fun. I'm one of five, and 5 steps of stairs, 46 cousins. So lots of family living within a 10-mile radius, and a grandmother that was all present, omniscient, and everywhere, and knew everybody. So you didn't do anything wrong in our town that she wouldn't find out about it. Grown up in a war, growing up in a very segregated society where Catholics are and were second-class citizens. It was hard to understand what it was when a child, like, just to look who's a Protestant. The joke was amongst the Catholics was that the Protestants' eyes were closer together. That's how you could tell the difference. And I kind of believed that. And then when you started going to school, we went to Catholic school and they went to the state school, which is Protestant. As I grew up, I began to realize too that at certain parts of the year, the Protestants didn't speak to Catholics in July when they put their Union Jacks out and marched. And they marched from a battle that happened in 1690 in the Republic of Ireland, but wasn't the Republic then, for the Prince William of Orange of Holland beat the Catholic English king in Ireland, James, in a battle, and the Pope was backing the Protestant. So go figure. And they've been celebrating that battle every year since, and it's kind of like their big moment. And so Catholics couldn't get jobs. Catholics didn't get good education. Catholics were gerrymandered, and in the whole time of the Northern Irish Parliament, the Catholics Party passed one bill in the whole life of that Parliament on ornithology bill. The police force were 99% Protestant, and they could tell the difference when they stopped you. If you're Aidan, Patrick, Sean, anything like that, they knew who you were. If they couldn't get your name, then they would ask you where you're from. They would know very quickly where you were from. My town was Banbridge, south of Belfast, so it was mostly Protestant, so they might think that you're Protestant. If they were really having problems, then they would ask you what church you went to, what school you went to. All Irish Catholics go to Saint something or other. So that's how they would get you. And if they were really desperate, they would say, what foot do you kick with? That's an Irish way of asking, are you Catholic or Protestant? So that's kind of the world I grew up in. And then you had the war going on in the background. They call it, the euphemism of it is the Troubles, where 3,500 people were murdered. And you had the British Army around and bombs and the whole thing. So my first movement out of the north, small n, you never said to a Northern Irish Catholic, oh, you're from Northern Ireland. I'm just advising you, do not do that. The north of Ireland, small n, the Holy Roman See recognizes one island. It has only been divided for 100 years, and it was built on a gerrymandered line around Protestants to keep a British state in Northern Ireland. So that's one thing will always set me off when people say, oh, you're from the north. I said, no, I'm from Ireland. It has been united, and the Holy Roman Church is the idea of it from St. Patrick forward. So I'm just saying. So anyway, I joined the Redemptorists and went to Galway at UCG Galway. And they really, we were from the north, and then we were the majority in the class. And we were from up there. And it wasn't really overt, but you were made to feel that it was different because we were from the north. And then after 6 years with the Redemptorists, I realized that I was too young to be a priest, that I was too wet and green behind the ears. And I took an opportunity, rather than going to Brazil to do a mission with the Redemptorists, I decided to come to San Francisco, to come to the States, got a J1 visa, and had a limited time on that visa. And I came and worked for the summer and totally fell in love with being here. And very quickly, the Redemptorists are known for liberation theology and openness, and the Redemptorists in the Philippines, Irish Redemptorists in the Philippines and Brazil, would have been coming home with those kind of very progressive attitudes to theology and ecclesiology and spirituality, which rubbed off on many of us. So I had worked in the slums of North Dublin, for example, doing social justice work, big housing projects, a bit like Cabrini Green in Chicago type of a deal, or here in San Francisco, the old Geneva Towers. In any case, after a few months, I realized I built decks in Concord and Walnut Creek for that summer with an Irish family. And then at the end of it, I realized I'm not going home. I just knew I wasn't going home. And I applied for a job with the Unified School District for special ed children through Golden Gate Regional Center. I applied for the job, and the two people that interviewed me were both Irish Americans. And they said, "We just love your accent." Well, I can talk. And so I got the job. And it was a new program, and they hired 8 new people, and it was training on the job. And so my first year was working in that job, travel training young, dually diagnosed young adults. And then around that time, I started working, volunteering with Shanti Project. And I went to Mass, of course, found community with the Franciscans and the Tenderloin, sometimes Mass, different other parts of the city. And it was over one time as a Holy Redeemer that Michael Vargas, an ex-Jesuit student, told me about this new program they were opening for all the AIDS work that was happening in 86, 87. And so I applied for that. And guess what? The two people that interviewed me were Irish Americans. And I was the only one that showed up for the manager job in a suit. Everybody seemed to show up in jeans and t-shirt, but I showed up in a suit and tie. And lo and behold, I got the job. And we opened that place in the Western Addition through Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese on the June 22nd, 1987 at 9 a.m. And the life was frightened out of me. Really, because I didn't know much about management. And I was even more afraid of the formerly homeless people with AIDS. I did that work for 5 years, became a property supervisor with Mercy Housing. And for 10 years, I worked with them in the Tenderloin and up and down the state. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I bought a house in the Oakland Hills and renovated it. I bought it for $296 and sold it for $1,050,000. Don't you love America? And so I was helping out at Our Lady of Lourdes with Father Seamus and doing RCIA. And then one day I was helping him with a retreat, and I went out, sat in the lake. And I just sat with Seamus and I started to cry. And he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Seamus, I'm 41 years old and my heart is to be a priest. And I think it's too late. You go to see Bishop Cummins on Monday morning." This was Saturday. I said, "Do you think so? Do you think he would take me?" I said, oh, for God's sake, Aidan, I'll set up the appointment myself. So Monday morning, I went and saw Bishop Cubbins, and he was a delight. He was an absolute delight. And this was like July. He said, can you start in August at the seminary? I said, Bishop, don't you need to do a psychological evaluation? I said, yeah, I do, but that's just pro forma. And I said, no, Bishop, I can't. I need to sell my house, and I have all sorts of stuff to do. I'll start January 1st. So that's what I did. I started January 1st. The seminary was a bit of a challenge, and I ended up been sent to Father Dan Danielson in Livermore. And I loved Dan. He was very bossy, but I could fight with him, and he liked to push back. And I ended up doing family life ministry and divorce ministry. And then got sent in my pastoral year to St. Bonaventure with Father Dick Mangini. And I absolutely fell in love with that community. So my first assignment was to Christ the King with Brian Joyce. And these three men who are giants in the Diocese of Oakland, the two of them have gone home to heaven, formed me and helped me be and allowed me to celebrate my gifts and talents. And in each of those places, I was able to set up grief groups and coffee mornings and book clubs, and all these things happened. And then I was sent to Holy Spirit in Fremont, and I broke my heart as I got into my little U-Haul and drove down 680 to Holy Spirit in Fremont. And I only stayed there a year. It was a difficult assignment, and that's all I'd say about that. The people were lovely, but it was a difficult assignment. And then Bishop Corleone called me and said, I'm sending you to St. Columba. I didn't even know where St. Columba was. I mean, I'd heard about it, but the diocese never had much to do with it, and the seminarians never interacted with it, and no one was ever sent there. And I knew Father Jason was there. And a quick story about that, and I know I'm long-winded, but that's kind of
you
the
are, and you don't have too many more minutes.
Okay, well,
You know,
I was on a bus in London, and I'd met my friend Mary, who had lost her job with the British government, had stopped all immigration treatment. She had lost her job because of that, and I had gone online and paid a bunch of bills for her. We're good friends. And I was in London going to Sweden to go see my brother, who was having a little bit of depression, and I'm the oldest and the rescuer. And I was on the first flight there, and I called Mary and said, are you in London? And she said she was, and she was on the tube. I'll meet you outside Houston Station in 10 minutes at a particular door. And she came out and she started bawling, crying. And I thought, okay, we're good friends, but we're not this good friends. She had gotten mugged on the underground in the minutes between us talking. So she didn't want to go back onto the underground, and she had a gay friend who had a key that she could go get because this guy had stolen her bag. And we went to an Irish pub and had a drink to discuss what we're going to do. We got on the bus passing Buckingham Palace, and Bishop Corleone called me, and the iPhone said, Bishop Corleone. Well, she was falling into me, sort of crying on the bus, but we didn't have FaceTime then, but I pushed her away immediately and answered the phone, almost like the bishop could see that this woman was on my shoulder. And Bishop said, I'd like you to go to St. Columba. And I had heard on the grapevine that was a possibility. And I went, I said, yes, Bishop, but I'd like to live there, because the previous pastor hadn't lived there. He had lived at St. Joseph the Worker. And he said, whatever you want, Father, I'm sure you'll work it out. Good luck. So I got off at Houston Station, passing Buckingham Palace. And we got off, and I did my happy dance on the side of the sidewalk, or pavement as they call it over there. And I couldn't wait to get to St. Columba. And I visited, and I was installed, and they were very suspicious of me. I think they really deserved a black priest, but they got me. And Father Stefan Kepler did an amazing transition team and did a fantastic report, and they had done a lot of work on it, but they got me. So I thought, well, they'll just love me because I'm lovable and we'll all get on very well. And very quickly I realized when I made mistakes about white privilege, when I remember I wasn't there too long, and one woman I'd become good friends with, she's very dark-skinned Black woman from Boston who grew up in St. Patrick's Parish with Irish priests and nuns. And we were going to a meeting in San Francisco. And I had a little car. It was a Saturn, 1999 Saturn. I don't care about cars too much. So, and it had a big Obama sticker on the back of it that somebody stuck on the back. So anyway, we're coming across the bridge. I'm coming off on 6th Street. And we're going to a social justice meeting. And the next thing is this big Crown Victoria with ICE agents or Homeland Security or somebody beeps at me. And I wind down the window. Yes, I wound the window down. And I put on the brakes and I yelled at them. And I was like, you are in the wrong lane. It's not me. Who the hell do you think you are? The cop looked. It was plain clothes. There were like 4 different races of guys in the car. And he was, oh man, I'm so sorry. Winds his window and goes off. And I turn and I look at Cressida. She's almost down in the well of the passenger seat of the car. She is almost hysterical. And I said, what the hell is wrong with you? And she goes, you don't do that when you're driving black. And I went, I'm not black, but I am. And I said, but I don't get it. She said, and then she told me the story of what her parents had told her, that every black family has to tell their children. You just heard that from Isabel. And I could feel the fear in her that day. And I came to understand something that I had never understood before. And I think there was a whole lot of lessons like that. The first few weeks when I had a dinner every Thursday night, people signed up. I set the dinner table up like Thanksgiving, and everybody came and shared a bottle of wine and dinner. And then you go in Vino Veritas. What brings you to St. Columba? And one old lady who was in her 80s, she said, Father, I don't like white people. And I'm a white person. I'm the only white person in the room. And I said, well, why would that be? She says, when I was 7 and I lived in Louisiana outside of New Orleans, one day I was on the bus with my cousin, and he was a little older than me. I was 7, and he sat in the wrong seat. I said, the wrong seat? She says, you know, like Rosa Parks. I went, oh, okay. She said, the white bus driver dragged him off the bus, and they lynched my cousin and hung him from a tree as I stood as a 7-year-old. And of course you don't like white people. If that trauma is in your life, but Father, I like you. You're one of the nice ones. I said, okay, well, I still have to prove that. I think my learning curve last year when I bought the book, it was recommended to me by Robin DiAngelo on white fragility. I cried when I read that book because I realized I kept saying, I'm a good person. I'm not racist. I'm from Northern Ireland. the north of Ireland. I have experienced being here with no papers for 5 years. I've experienced getting beaten up at the AIDS hospice because I thought if I was there, and black kids, spending a week in hospital with a broken jaw because I was coming out of the AIDS hospice late one night and gotten beaten up because they thought I had AIDS and they thought I was gay. And then I couldn't go to the police, and I'm in hospital on my own, and I couldn't call my parents who weren't well. And I am like, and I didn't know that San Francisco was a sanctuary city, and I was too afraid. So I went to a funeral. I went to a house, and then this is where I'll end. But 3 years ago, I got a call. I was coming from Palo Alto, and it was a wedding I was doing, and of a white couple, and they come to our church, and the call said that I had to go to South Berkeley to a family whose son had just been murdered, and I knew who they were. And I got to the house, and I did a drive-by first, not a drive-by shooting, just a drive-by, and I saw 10 young black men standing outside that house, and the hair on the back of my neck just rose up. And I wasn't wearing clerics, so I pulled around the corner. I found a wrinkled shirt and one of those little priesty tab things, and it was wrinkled, but I didn't care. It was my armor. I put it on, and I walked around the corner, and those kids couldn't have been nicer to me. And I got into the house to the grandmother who I'd known very well, and this was the second child of this woman's that was shot dead because of gang violence or whatever. And that was in the middle of the renovation. And I did that funeral mass by myself with about 500 black people. And Berkeley police and Oakland police within a few blocks of it, because there were people packing guns, and I chastised them. And then this young Baptist minister got up and said what I said in ghetto language. And a child got murdered that night. Somebody in that church went for revenge to the door of who they thought killed, and shot through the door and killed a little 5-year-old girl. But in all that being said, there's a lot of learning curve, and contrary to what you might think, St. Columba right now our income has gone from when I got there very limited, where we couldn't pay the diocese, to today we take in about 11 to 12,000 every Sunday. We are, as we say in Ireland, riding the pigs back. I've got 60 ministries. All our bills are paid. The place looks fantastic, and everybody's engaged and involved. And we have ministries. Most of our people are black and professional, and doctors, lawyers, nurses, nurse practitioners, dentists. We've got a wonderful health cabinet that's been operating for about 30 years. They get grants and do all sorts of work with people. And we have 100 different zip codes. So black people pass your parish, and they come from Livermore, they come from Palo Alto, and there's one white man drives from Calistoga every Sunday because they can't find a church that they feel comfortable in. And so people...
As I said to Isabel, tell them if they come to St. Perpetua, we will receive them with open arms, because one of the telltale lessons for me, just in trying to prepare for tonight, is that there wasn't a black person in our community that I could ask to join us tonight. And that was painful, actually, to realize. So Aidan, thanks for sharing your own faith journey and journey to ministry. If you've never been to St. Columba's, I give you permission to go there for Sunday Mass.
And bring your envelopes and write St. Perpetua on it, and we will send it honestly, because we have enough money and we're okay of sending you back
But
your
you'll meet
dollars.
warm and wonderful people, beautiful, exciting, dynamic music with their wonderful choir, and obviously a wonderful pastor. So thanks for being with us, Aidan. We just have a couple minutes left. And I want to say that Aidan mentioned one of the resources that I was going to suggest, the book titled White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And we'll put these resources on the website. The other book that it's been recommended is by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's called Between the World and Me. And it's put in the form of a letter of to the author's teenage son about the feelings, symbolism, and realities associated with being Black in the United States. The other essay that I found just in the last week that has been out is entitled What to Do About White Privilege. And it's written by Father Brian Massingale. Father Massingale is a professor of ethics and theology at Fordham University in New York. And this article for me, it's a lengthy article, explained really what that term white privilege is all about. So again, we'll put that on the website and I recommend you reading that. Next week, we're at our town hall. This year in June, the church is celebrating the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si, which is Pope Francis' second encyclical. Its subtitle, or in English, is Our Care for Our Common Home. And the title, Laudato Si, is Italian for Praise Be to You. It's the first word of St. Francis Assisi, Hymn of Creation. And in it, in the encyclical, Pope Francis is calling for swift and unified global action to save our earth. And it's not about ecology. It's about critique of our throwaway culture, the warning that we have of the symptoms of our planet. Global warming is part of a greater problem, and that's the world's indifference to the destruction of the planet because we want to pursue economic gain. You can read the encyclical. It's not that long online. Just Google it, and you'll find it on the Vatican website and other websites. And you might want to read that in preparation for next week. So members of our Social Justice Committee will provide an overview and a summary of the encyclical, and then they'll share some concrete ways with us as to how we can take action at the bidding of Pope Francis and get involved. Again, thanks to Isabel and to Father Aidan and to Mary Olwyn for giving us focus.
John, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
I think, and this, we just put up our banner of Black Lives Matter recently. And, I think from the stories that you've heard, you do realize that, you know, it's Black people that are being murdered and killed. And because of the stories you've heard, our people are really, really, really hurting. The pain is palpable, and it's really hard. It is very difficult to know how to respond. But I think one of the responses that I think, and not a panacea, but I think if equal access to education was delivered so that on the flatlands of Oakland or the hills or wherever, that every child has equal access to all of the resources it needs. And I think you can see this borne out in Northern Ireland, where when President Clinton had the peace agreement signed and 800 years of strife was ended, that once you level the playing field on education and you give everybody a fair whack, all of my cousins, of those 46 cousins, are all now middle class from what was working class, and they all have their own homes, and they all have beautiful families, and they're all educated because they all got the opportunity, and that opportunity was grasped, and it is really transforming that little part of the world. And I see that as a way to, once they rise, everybody rises. And I think that access would really, to me, would make a lot of difference. And then, just one last quick story, and it's a little one. A really beautiful African-American woman last year joined our RCIA class and then moved to North Carolina. And on a feast day, she went into North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, and went to Mass, and nobody would shake her hand at the sign of peace because she's Black. And she said she just sat in the church and cried. And when she came back and told me that story, I just wanted to cry with her. And I don't get it. And I just hope that we use our beautiful Catholic Church as a means to bridging the divides, do what Jesus would want us to do, and to look into our own hearts, own what we can, and then make a difference. I thought Mary's introduction was amazing, and I want to thank Isabel for her story too, and on all of our stories. And thank you, John, for inviting me. As a friend, I appreciate you as a brother priest, and your friendship means a lot.
Father John, can I? 1 minute. I'll talk fast, I promise.
Yes, Isabel. Go ahead.
I want to thank you for inviting me. Rita, again, thank you. Mary, that was a really educational for me. I really appreciate that. Father Aiden, I knew Father Seamus. I was at Our Lady of Lourdes in year 2002, 2005. I also rode my bike to St. Columba between 2000 2005. I don't know if you were there yet.
No.
So I've been
Not
there.
that old. I only got gray hair when I went to St. Columba. I was perfectly brown and black then, and then they made me go this color of gray. And
Well, funny, that's what happened to me at St. Perpetual, but it took 22 years.
Some people are shaking their heads, John.
So
Father
let
this
me.
is amazing. This is really great. I appreciate this. I am going to ask my pastor to do something like this. This is really great. Thank you.
Who's
You're
your
welcome.
pastor?
Father Father Robert of
Reed.
oh my God,
Robert Ream. He's one of the strangest priests in the Diocese of Oakland.
Our Lady, no, it's Most Holy Rosary. Why suddenly I can Father Ramiro Flores? Oh my God.
Oh, okay. I don't
He
know.
moved from Richmond. He just been our pastor for like less than 2 years. He's still very shy.
So our closing prayer is based on the peace prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, but a little bit different. So let us pray. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance. Where there is apathy, let me provoke. Where there is compliance, let me bring questioning. Where there is silence, may I be a voice. Where there is too much comfort and too little action, grant disruption. Where doors are closed and hearts locked, grant me the willingness to listen. When laws dictate and pain is overlooked, when tradition speaks louder than need, grant that I may seek to do justice rather than talk about it. Disturb me, O Lord, to be with as well as for the alienated, to love the unlovable as well as the lovely. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance. And let the church say amen.
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 Have a good evening,
Thank you.
everyone. We'll
Father
see
John, would you
God
help
bless
the prayer,
you.
please?